But the thing that is happening is that as they bring this workforce with them, no one is talking to them saying, don't screw it up when you move to this new place. Okay,
Right,
I got to
right.
leave California, Silicon Valley, because this place sucks. And so they end up coming here and they want to vote the same way. Now, there are individuals that are leaving California, Illinois, New York, and New Jersey for all the right reasons. But when you have this mass transplant, and I call it the Locust effect. I mean, people go to the, very good, thriving, fertile grounds like California used to be, and they chew it up and destroy it. And then they look and see where else they can go.
Where do you think some of the, say, disaffected liberals, maybe libertarians, like the wider group right now that I think I've been saying for a while, it's sort of woke versus everybody, and it's our job as everybody to kind of figure out how we can work together, how we can disagree and agree to disagree, et cetera. How do you think that thing can work? Or do you think that thing can work?
I do think it can work, and it has to be based upon individual rights, freedoms, and liberties. And, I'll give you a case in point. Just recently, I was up in New York City and, went out to get something to eat after, a Fox interview and everything. And I walked into this diner and the guy asked me, where's your COVID shot card? And I said, I don't have a COVID shot card. I'm visiting here from Texas. He said, well, you can't eat here. I think that's going to be the thing that unites people, because I remember my mother and father, once upon a time, they were told that they couldn't eat in certain places because of their skin color. But now we're being told that we can't eat in certain places because someone has decided that we have to get this thing injected into our bodies. And I really believe that when people start to hear that they no longer have control over their own bodies, that's going to be a rallying cry. Just the same as you've seen when Terry McAuliffe stands up in a debate and says parents don't have a right to decide what their children are being taught. Oh man, you brought out people in Virginia that would have never cared about a Virginia gubernatorial race. And so a year ago, Joe Biden wins Virginia by 11 or 12 points. A year later, they lose Virginia by 2 or 3 points. So I think that that's the shift that we see happening. When you start to touch people's individual rights, freedom, and liberty, when you start to reach inside their homes or affect their bodies, then people are going to wake up to this.
Yeah, it used to be my body, my choice. Not so much for them anymore. But you mentioned 2 to 3 points. Speaking of 2 to 3 points, the last senatorial campaign in Texas, Ted Cruz only beat Beto by about 3 points. I think it was 2.5, if I'm not mistaken. It was a lot closer. Yeah, it was a lot closer than people thought. What does that tell you about what's happening in Texas? Is Austin getting weird, filtering throughout the state? Is that what's happening?
Well, I think that the Beto effect that happened in 2018 was that he was a new person, and the media built this aura around him. And there was a lot of angst and anxiety against Senator Cruz. But now the cat's out the bag, and we know who this Mr. O'Rourke is and what he stands for. And he's completely antithetical to Texas principles and values. But when you look at what is happening in Texas, when you look at what is happening in many red states, California used to be a red state. I mean, this was the state that gave us Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. What is happening in Texas is that we have had governors going to blue states and saying, why don't you pick up and move your business or your corporation here? Because we have better policies and you can economically thrive. But the thing that is happening is that as they bring this workforce with them, no one is talking to them saying, don't screw it up when you move to this new place. Okay, I got to leave California, Silicon Valley, because this place sucks. And so they end up coming here and they want to vote the same way. Now, there are individuals that are leaving California, Illinois, New York, and New Jersey for all the right reasons. But when you have this mass transplant, and I call it the Locust effect. I mean, people go to the, very good, thriving, fertile grounds like California used to be, and they chew it up and destroy it. And then they look and see where else they can go. But I will tell you, hats off to Elon Musk, because earlier in November, Elon Musk put out a tweet to the people there in Austin saying, admonishing them, saying, don't let Austin become the new San Francisco. Because the people in Austin, since they defunded the police, got all woke and everything like that, they've seen a 66% increase in violent crime, 71% increase in homicide. The homeless situation there is absolutely disgusting and appalling. People don't go downtown in Austin at night, but yet they still voted down a proposition to refund the police. And so I think that's at the core something that's going to change, because all of a sudden when people realize that their personal safety and security is at risk, they'll back away from this.
Can you get those people, though, to change? I get that you might be able to get the true Texan that's been there, for a lifetime to go, okay, we really got to vote the right way. But the ones that come from Silicon Valley, it takes sort of a little smacking around for them to realize that they're leaving the thing that they voted for.
It does. And I think it's another thing that we have to do is teach them about, the history of Texas or, the history of Georgia or Tennessee and why they're successful. And, understand that Texas is the only state in the union that fought for and won its independence by itself. But I think the other thing that we have to do, without a doubt, is understand that, find out where those strong crossing points, like you and I just discussed, where you get the 60 to 65%. Because I think it's that 35 to 40%. You're probably just not going to get through to them. But let's go after the people that understand. And that's why we had such success when I was the chairman of the party going down into the Rio Grande Valley. And we told the people in the Hispanic community who had never seen a Republican Party chairman in the Rio Grande Valley previous to that, your principles and values are our principles and values. It wasn't about the outreach. It was about the engagement. Outreach means you show up in a Black History Month, Hispanic American Heritage Month, and then people never see you again until a couple of months before an election. But when you're there all the time, 24/7, 365, talking about those common points that you can expand upon, then people will rally to your cause. And then again, I think that this is more of a philosophical, ideological, cultural basis that we have to approach things and not just about political parties anymore.
So I hate to do the identity politics thing, obviously, and I know you don't want to do it either, but it exists whether we talk about it or not.
That's their battleground.
That's what they've got. As you know, I campaigned with Larry Elder, who's a good friend of mine. I saw what the machine did to him. For Joe Biden to show up here the day before the election, refuse to say Larry's name, call him a Trump clone, a guy who grew up in South Central LA, son of a janitor. I mean, it's so extraordinarily evil. The stuff that Gavin Newsom did, the evil ads that Reed Hastings from Netflix put out about Larry, blackface of white supremacy, according to the LA Times. You know all the stuff. There's obviously going to be a version of that that's going to come after you. You've been through the game before, but are you ready for it in a gubernatorial thing, which is different than a congressional race and being a talking head on Fox, et cetera?
Well, absolutely. And one of the things about being here in the state of Texas, the Republican Party of Texas was founded on Independence Day of 1867 by 150 Black men in Houston, Texas. One of the early chairmen was Norris Wright Cooney. You think about Juneteenth, and you think about how recently they just dedicated a statue to a man who was a former slave, State Senator Matthew Gaines, who was instrumental in establishing Texas A&M University and Prairie View A&M University. And he's buried there at Texas A&M University. Guess who's also buried there on the campus of Texas A&M? President George H.W. Bush and his wife. And so when you talk about these things and you use history to illuminate people and you talk about the real party of systemic racism has been the Democrat Party. I often tell folks there are two ways that you can enslave people. One is that you work them for no pay, and the other is that you pay them for no work. And tell me which party has done that in the history of the United States of America. So I think that as long as you stand strong and you always go on the offense, not on the defense, you put them back on their heels. All this talk about white supremacy and racism, I have yet to see anyone on the left speak out against Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger, created Planned Parenthood for one reason, because she believed that blacks were undesirables and human weeds. And yet we see 71 to 73% of Planned Parenthood clinics in minority communities. So as long as we are the aggressor, and as long as we're putting them on their heels, we don't let them define the narrative. And I think that's the thing that the military taught me, and that's how we're going to make sure that we don't allow them to dictate and define who I am.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.